So this video is a really quick tutorial speeding up my process for shading in eyes. I'm going to start by sort of reiterating any shapes that I think need some adjustments, like the shape of my eyelid crease. Today I noticed it was a little bit higher and I had a second crease in it on the inside corner. And now I'm going to start in with the pupil of my eye. I'm using a pencil that's been worn down pretty well on the end, so I've got a nice round soft blunt tip. I'm going to shade in the shape of that pupil first. It's pretty dark, and then I've just added in the highlight shapes on my iris. Now to shade in the iris, I'm starting straight away with just a base value. A lot of people like to leave the iris too light for your eye color, so you want to make sure you give it some value. So I'm just giving myself a general base tone, a little bit lighter than the pupil. I noticed that mine also is darker, has a darker rim and ring around the outer edge. And then as I shade that in, I'm going to go back through and then add, switching to a sharper pointed pencil, I'm going to add some of those little streaks, those little starburst streaks. I can see those pretty well on my eye. They're heavier towards the outer edge and then sort of fade as they move towards the inner edge. So as I keep layering in these values, I'm going to just keep looking in the mirror, reiterating what I see, including the little shadow at the top of the iris cast on it from the eyelashes of my upper eye. And then I'm going to go through, once I finish that, and reiterate the darkness of the pupil. The pupil is the darkest thing, the darkest value on your entire face, so that should be really, really nice and dark. Then I'm going to go through with an eraser and pull out any last minute highlights that I think I need to add in to reiterate that light ring I have on the inner edge of my eye. Now I can go on and start shading in the white of the eye. The white of the eye is never actually pure white, so you want to give it a tiny bit of a value. It's really subtle, it's very soft, but using that blunt pointed pencil a little bit on the side edge of it, adding in those little shadows that I see. Also adding in the tear duct, it's a little bit darker than the white of the eye, and looking for those shadows as well. Next, I'm going to go back in with that soft, blunt pointed pencil, using sort of the side of it, creating some base value for my skin tones. I'm going to be looking to see and asking myself, what is the value that I see around my eye compared to the pupil and compared to the iris and compared to the white of the eye? How much darker or lighter is my skin tone? Nothing on it will ever actually be a true, pure white. As white as the piece of paper. So you want to give everything a little bit of value and start looking to see if you have a base value, where are those shadows? The inside shadow of the corner of the eye, I see there. I usually have pretty dark circles underneath my eyes and some shading developed underneath the eyebrow. If you think about our eyebrow, it's really sitting on the raised up portion of our eye socket, and then everything below our eyebrow sort of falls and begins to curve underneath and away from the light source, creating a good bit of shadows. And so using the side of that pencil, I'm just starting in very general shading, using the side of that pencil, laying in some value. Notice my pencil's going in lots of different directions. That's going to help blend and soften some of the shading marks that I'm making. And then I'm just going to finish up filling in that lower under eye shadow. Mine are fairly dark because of that eye socket and the way that my eye is shaped. And then I'm just going to continue filling in some basic value structure. I noticed that across the top bridge of my nose I have a pretty good highlight, so I'm just going to shade around that area to develop the lighter highlight in the middle. And now with sort of all that shading, I noticed that I need to reiterate and darken that upper eyelid crease. And it's not a really solid heavy line, it sort of fades. It fades into the line and then it fades back out of the line. So I'm going to soften that up a little bit. Then I'm going to go in and start in sort of shading that eyebrow. I like to give it a base value first, just very loosely, just to give it some tone that's darker than my general skin tone. And I'm just going to use the side of that pencil. And then I'm going to go in with a sharp pointed pencil. I'm using a mechanical pencil here, which works pretty well. And I'm going to start creating little individual hairs. And for those hairs, I like to sort of use heavy pressure at the beginning of a mark and then sort of a flick and lift technique. And that kind of gives the effect of the hair is a little bit thicker towards the root, darker and heavier, and then as it lifts up and off, it kind of fades into a nice sort of pointed edge. And I'm just going to go through and looking at myself in the mirror, looking at the direction of the hair growth, They're all going in slightly varying different directions, but in general, they all move towards the outer section of my eyebrow. I'm going to go back through and continue developing some of those shadows, smoothing out some of that shading as well. Going in lots of different directions helps to gradually smooth, so I don't have to rely on finger smudging to blend my values. I'm really working to try to develop my values simply through layering and pencil pressure over time, rather than sort of cheating and smudging my values instead. I'm also constantly sort of jumping around the drawing and filling in and adding more shading here and there, because I'm constantly assessing in my mind what the value structure looks like and making those comparisons. And now I'm going to go in and start my favorite part, which is adding in the eyelashes. I do this last so that way the eyelashes can really feel like they're sitting on top of the eyelid and moving out and away from the eye, rather than being softened and blended into the skin tones. So I'm using that same technique with really heavy pressure at the beginning of the mark and flick and lift as I move that eyelash outward. They should be heavier and fuller where they touch the eye, and then they fade out and taper out as they move out and away. Also, pay really close attention to the direction that your eyelashes are facing. They don't all go in the same direction. Notice even on the inner portion of my eye, some of mine point downward, and then they gradually begin to point upward, and then they also move and point outward. Now, starting the eyelashes on the lower eyelid, they don't start right up against the eye. Notice there's a little bit of a gap between the eye and the skin where the eyelashes actually start. There's actually a little highlight right there. And just very delicately placing in those eyelashes. They're much shorter and they're much finer than the eyelashes on the upper eyelid. Now I'm going to go back through and finish up. I'm going to erase a few little highlights that I see and go back and reiterate the darkest values that I see in that portion of my eye. Then I'll go through and speed up my drawing and show you the second eye.